Hello and welcome to Unboxed, the podcast that dives deep into the world of custom packaging and innovative brand experiences. In each episode, we'll be exploring the latest trends, innovations, and best practices in the design and packing industry, and then taking a look at how they can help businesses like yours to create memorable and impactful brand experiences. I'm your host, Sam Johnston. Let's get started. I'm your host, Sam Johnston, and in this episode, we'll be talking to Alex Parker, who is Head of Wellness at Burgopak. They're an award-winning packaging design agency and manufacturer based in London, and he's got almost 20 years of experience here in packaging, manufacturing, a long list of things, but a healthy background as well in product design, and works with some of the biggest brands on the market. So we're very excited to have you on the show. Thanks so much for giving us some time, Alex.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we're really excited. And as usual on this call, we're going to go through a set of 5 questions. And those questions are, if you're listening, you can jump to those. They should be chaptered. But the first one will be what inspired our guests today to get into their industry and how did they get their start. The second one will be more about how does custom packaging contribute to creating these unique brand experiences that we're looking to be able to offer. And then the third one would be any success stories or case studies of really good businesses out there that have done some of this amazing stuff. Number 4 will then be some of the challenges and roadblocks. So if you're listening to this and you want to get ahead of some of those things and learn from the experience, we might have some of those to offer. And the last one, we'll get out the crystal ball, take a look at the future here and see what's going to be happening in the next 5 to 10 years. So without further ado, we'll cycle right back up to the very beginning here. Alex, what inspired you to get into your industry and how did you get your start in the field?
To go right back, it was, as a kid and like a lot of sort of friends in the creative industry, it's curious, taking things apart, observing the things around you, just being interested by all of those things that you come across around the house. And there's certain things that jump out, like, a camera that my dad had. I was just fascinated by that, or the stereo that was there, or the yellow Walkman I was given, and, and then destructively took everything apart to see what was going on inside. And I was like, okay, there's something in this. And, I started thinking about architecture or engineering. And then I learned about this career called product design. And I was like, this seems incredible. It's this career where um, you're sort of creating the objects and interactions that touch the lives of people around the world. It's like this is it. And one of my best friends landed upon the same sort of like career trajectory at a similar sort of time. And that went off to that led to university studying product design. My brother had set his sights on digital design, so there was some influence there as well, I think.
Yeah.
And then university internships and freelance, and this job came up for packaging, and I was like, "Well, that's interesting." And it was an alumni of the same course, same university, who was working there. It was like, "Well, okay, there seems to be a fit for this, my background." And I went for the interview, and that was it. I was away. It was this whole, something I hadn't really considered through the product design career, but yeah, packaging as an extension of the product it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And your kind of move through your career, did you start in your current role and current organization, or did you go through lots of different organizations? What was that journey like?
I've been at Burgopak for many years now. So I came in as a junior, and sort of you learn the ropes, upskill in the world of packaging, and and put those product design skills, which are all cross transferable, to use in packaging. And then to get to the role I am now, it was the majority of my time was in a design role, working up to sort of head of design for wellness and sit on the management team of the company. And yeah, now this head of wellness role to really grow our presence there.
Fantastic. And is that a strategic direction the company's going in? And what's new for Burgopak in the future?
It's something that we're really excited about. I mean, I've been working, a speciality maybe in sort of healthcare and wellness sort of products for a while, and there seems an incredible fit. Well, there is an incredible fit. It's not, it seems like it. There is an incredible fit for for packaging in those
Yeah.
products, and the more projects we took on, the more you reinforce the value of packaging. People see what you've done for other brands, and they're like, "Wow, this is incredible. We want some of this. We didn't realize we could do this, or this was even an option." And so we took learnings from all the other industries that we work in. Like we are incredibly well known, maybe in packaging for fintechs
Hmm.
and things like that. So, we've taken some of the learnings there, bringing some of the delight that we've built into to the card packaging and brought it across to these sorts of products, but also, the huge operation that goes into, getting those products out at quantity translates quite well to the skills that you need to work at volume in some of the healthcare and wellness products as well.
Yeah. And what a fantastic experience space to bring to this area of the market. That's really exciting. And within that specific vertical or in wider verticals, with just within your experience, I'll move on to the next question here, which is how does custom packaging contribute to creating these brand experiences? And what are some of the most effective strategies you've seen for achieving that?
Well, interacting with the packaging makes you feel something about the product and the brand. That's the same across any sort of product. What's quite interesting, maybe in the wellness space, is there are these heightened emotions sometimes around the products that you're working with. You're dealing with health, so you do have to tread incredibly carefully when designing the packaging to get it right, because the like I say, yeah, the emotion wrapped up in it can have quite extreme effects. So
Hmm.
I take a negative example just to highlight the importance of packaging and why you have to, you know, cross the T's and dot the I's. But it's winter, it's cold and flu season. At least it is, here in the
Yep.
UK. So I went to the shop. It's like I needed a cold and flu product. So you look around and like, okay, mid-market pricing. There's a particular brand jumped out. You zoom in, you read the messaging. Yeah, this is the product I want. The efficacy seems, I'm convinced. I'll buy it. You think job done? But then I open it and I go to pop out the first capsule, and it's like, well, this is tricky. And then the capsule crushes as it comes, out of the aluminium lidding, and then it's the same with the second tablet, and then 4 hours later it's the same. you know that's packaging, and I've got a literal bitter taste in my mouth because I'm not taking the capsule as I should. I've got the flavor in my
Yeah.
mouth. I'm not convinced that it's going to do anything for me because I've wasted some of it. It's in my mouth rather than being swallowed, and I'm probably not going to buy this product again or this brand again. I'm going to be prejudiced against them. And
Yep.
you put your packaging hat on and you can unpack how this came about. Okay, was it material selection? Is the lidding, they didn't analyze the burst strength of the lidding, or perhaps there's something in the geometry or the base web that's playing a problem. There's the proximity of the pockets together. Customer doesn't care. What the customer has experienced is, I haven't been able to use this product. Why would I go and buy it again? Especially when there's so
Yep.
much competition for some of these products. So and this is just a cold and flu treatment. If you're doing something that's treating like a serious illness, you'd be livid, you'd be scared, you'd be wrapped, there'd be so much wrapped up in it, and you'd be shouting about it, you'd be telling everyone. So the negative effects are hugely impactful. So you really do have to get it right. So
Yep.
and there's so many characteristics of the packaging that you have to explore to get it right. And you explore the functional aspects of the packaging. It's got to protect. You need durability, and you've got usability and the ergonomics. You've got your material selection. You've got the aesthetic and the visual identity, the shape of it. These are all things that you're working with, and you need to use those to um, play to all those things that are going to make the customer want to buy it again. So, can you signal quality? Can you build, to help build some trust? Is the packaging easy to use? Because, you don't want to add friction to this process. If it's difficult to use, you're probably not going to come back. Um,
Yep.
can you encourage the correct use of the product itself, which is a really important thing with devices and things like test kits, and maybe we can talk about a little bit more around that as well. But you've got this, can you build a memorable unboxing, and can you build that visual identity? Can you make the right sustainability choices to maybe align the values of the packaging with the brand, with the product? And you also get to play around with a lot of these products. There's kind of like this ritualistic sort of element to it. You need to buy them on a repeat basis. So
Yep.
the experience is affirming, or it's reaffirming your alignment with this brand. It's the right product. Um, and I
So good.
guess something like test kits, I mentioned, is a really interesting example of how important packaging can be in, wanting to do it again. So and we use this case study with, with brands. It's like you imagine two scenarios. You've got this underlying health concern, you want to explore it, or you want to make an improvement to your health, and you're going to get some background information by doing an at-home test kit. And it arrives, and you've got this box. You open it up, and it's literally just a sea of lancets and tubes and the paraphernalia and
Yeah.
a 35-step instruction for use. And you've spent 200, £300, or $200, $300 on it, and you've got to do this correctly, or you get nothing out of it. Um, there's a lot in that. And the second scenario might be, well, you open it up and you've got steps one, two, and three, and the IFU. The components are neatly organized, and the packaging can talk you through the process. And you add little interventions like, oh, something that you might do is add like a tube holder. So doing a finger prick test, and you've got to milk the blood from your finger. You've got a tube holder. It's a little thing, but these are little interventions that all add up to, this brand cares about me. It cares about this journey. It cares about my health journey. It is an extension of the product, and this might be the only physical touch point you get with this brand.
Yeah.
But you work through all of these steps. You hopefully correctly take the test, so you're not having to phone up, try and get another test delivered, redo it. The added cost for the brand owner as well is another consideration. But the fact you can do that test correctly once, your hand was held, it wasn't this huge, or it wasn't as big an undertaking as it could do, or some of that anxiety was deflated, you're more likely to do it again. If
Yeah.
it was horrible, it'd be like, oh, I've got my results. I'll figure out what I'm going to do with it, and I'm not coming back to that experience. So, packaging is so important in building that experience. And as we mentioned, there's so many characteristics of packaging that you can play with to build out that experience. And so you
Yeah.
just, you lean on them, and you put the time in to build that experience. And a user
So good.
experience lens is a great way of making decisions as well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think of retention or lifetime value of clients and all this stuff on the front end and even at the back end of the customer journey. And a lot of that is played with digital tools. But actually, if you come to the middle here and focus user experience across the whole brand experience from the initial digital touch points or physical on the high street all the way through to the product in the hand, that user experience goes the whole way. And from our conversations with other organizations that are trying to solve some of these problems as well, the sort of the net promoter score, the NPS style of if it's a negative experience in any way, shape, or form, that's actually a massive percentage of loss for customers where it's not really an issue. They don't notice certain things going wrong, but there's nothing in particular that makes them go, that was really thoughtful. That really doesn't count. It's the stuff on the front end where people actually have that experience where they go, they thought about me. That's actually really smart. I wasn't expecting that. That made it really easy. Those emotions pay a huge amount into brand growth, and that's something that can be done in the middle. People often forget that. So
Yeah.
the third question here, hopefully, we talked a lot there about kind of the theory and the reasons why, and also some of the negatives that the organizations are going to see. Maybe we could move here into some of the success stories or some case studies of any businesses that you've seen who have transformed their organizations through these packaging and design exercises. Do you have any of those to share?
Yeah, we've got some great ones in the pipeline, but we can't talk about those. So some of the ones we can talk about now. So there's a UK health tech that we have worked with for a number of years, which is Thriver, and they do personalized at-home blood testing. And they are living and breathing everything we discussed up there. The care for the customer or patient, it extends from through every single touch point. Because what you do often see with brands, and especially maybe in some of this, um I get the overlap between sort of like healthcare and wellness sort of products, is there's a sort of like disconnect between the packaging, branding, and maybe the digital sort of brand experience. Like, a lot of money's been spent on building this digital first experience. It's an incredible website. And then you receive something in like the incumbent packaging style of the cheapest possible tuck box or something like
Yeah.
that. And it's like, I don't know. There's brands building different experiences, and you extend it to the packaging. It's powerful. Fiverr live it and breathe it, and we've worked with them for a number of years. And as the different testing technologies emerged, and we've gone through the process again and built iterations of the kit and tried to build in some of those wins into that next generation of packaging. And we've got, I think the great thing there is the collaboration and sort of like feedback as well. Not afraid to be open and honest with the two companies, what's working, what isn't working, and addressing it and improving it, which I think is an important relationship to have.
Yeah.
It's too easy. It's all too easy sometimes to pick or to land upon a packaging format and then you just stick with it for a million years. And
Yeah.
the beauty of working with paperboard, which we do quite often, is you can be quite agile. Changing a tool and making a small incremental change, which can have a tangible benefit, can be really easy to roll out. I say that so
Yeah.
there are projects where it's really not, but small changes have big impacts, elsewhere in the operations. But when you can, you should.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting one for us.
Yeah. Great. And is there any kind of personal aspirational product experiences or brand experiences that you had? Is there anyone out there in the world that you just love and you think they're doing it really well?
Oh, anyone else out there? I think there is some really interesting sort of brands out there in the US. There's some fantastic brands. Quite a fan of yeah, Hims. Sort of jump out as I love the
Yeah.
branding. Um, yeah, I'd say that's the one that's talking to me right
It's
now in this
jumping
moment.
out. I threw that
But
question at you from left field there. Sometimes people are like, when I was a child, I remember this one thing, or I remember as I was growing up, there was this one experience that I had with a product that kind of stuck with them. And they've always been trying to recreate that magic, that tribal brand feeling of belonging and being represented in something physical. So yeah, Hims is a great one. We see a lot of their digital advertising as well, and I think they're in some retail stores as well now. So they're just scaling and growing, doing some really cool stuff.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and what are some of the biggest challenges or roadblocks? So some of the people listening to this, they might be maybe they're entrepreneurial. They've got an idea, they haven't quite brought it all the way yet, but they're going to come across some of these challenges. And then we also have some listeners that are in slightly sort of medium to bigger organizations that are actually in the product team. So there's a spectrum of listeners here. But what are some of the biggest challenges or roadblocks that businesses are likely to face when it comes to packaging, and how might they overcome those ahead of schedule?
I think anecdotally, I found it varies depending on maybe the size of the company and also maybe what the background is to the people leading the charge. Um, so in a smaller company, what you quite often find is this might be their first foray into packaging. It was the first time they've had to package a product. They might come from a science background and they have this incredible product that they're going to bring to market. There's a few, it might be that packaging is all of a sudden, okay, now we need to put it in something, can we turn it around in 3 weeks? We've done the 5 years of work on this thing now. It's like, well,
Yeah,
we can be agile, but to do packaging right, you want to put some time and resource into it. So that's your time. That's your stakeholders' time. We're always a big advocate for getting everyone involved who's going to be touching that packaging. Again, to go back to maybe test kits, it's if you're introducing a new bit of packaging, then you need to be who's doing the kitting, who's bringing everything together, because you can give them a massive headache, or you can work with them on optimizing that kitting process. And if they're involved in that process, then you're not introducing this cost driver or complexity driver, or preventing you scaling up in a few months' time, or just kicking a headache
yeah,
down the road. You've got to engage all those stakeholders, and it's a role we quite often play is advocating for everyone else who's in this process. Let's speak to the lab. Let's go and see what they're doing. How are they going to handle this on arrival? And it's amazing what you learn. Well, this is how we sort the product. This is what we've got to do. And you can imagine I can give them 10 different things they need to do to even get the box open. To bury something inside of it. Well, they might need to charge you for that. So all of a sudden
yeah,
there's a packaging problem that's being kicked from there. So advocating for everyone else that's in the supply chain that you know is going to be involved is hugely important. Get their buy-in, lean on their expertise, get them to help solve problems. Because I'm not the lab expert, or I'm not, I have an appreciation of the kitting process, but they've got all their operational expertise that they're going to be able to offer this project. So for a smaller company, sometimes it's that, and that can feel unwieldy. So the right person or company can really help, streamline or guide you through that process.
Yeah.
There's also maybe the enticement of, you know, an off-the-shelf solution. And by that I mean like, well, I could, with a few mouse clicks, I could buy this thing and then my product will probably fit in there and I'm done. And it's like you can do that, but then there's, as we've mentioned, there's all, there's all those considerations you can put into packaging, and great packaging works through all of those things and finds a way of exploiting each one of those characteristics or properties of the packaging to
Yeah.
really lift the user experience, your product experience. And there's also, that quality thing as well. You want a trusted partner. If you haven't got a trusted partner, you might be able to get it cheap and you might be able to get it quick, and then it arrives and it doesn't work, and all of a sudden your product launch is delayed, and that's a sunk cost into that, and you're tying up that precious resource that you have trying to resolve that headache as well as trying to source new packaging. So smaller companies, there's a lot going on, and there's some hand
Yeah.
holding that can be done. And then bigger companies, sometimes it's just that internal selling. It might be you worked up this incredible, in our opinion, or someone else's opinion, it's this great bit of packaging, but then you have to convince the other people within that organization, and you also might have um, the incumbent operations that packaging needs to go through. So you also have to sort of like prove that out. So, and by that I mean you might have a concept, and even to get that concept to that next stage, you might have to convince 5, 10 people,
Yeah.
and then you can start engaging engineering teams or things like that, or logistics teams on how the packaging is going to go through there, and then start feeding back their input to perfecting it. But there's a lot of convincing people along the way and finding out who those stakeholders are, is part of the journey. But
Yeah.
that, I guess that's, it's part of the fun. You got to sell the creative, you got to sell the dream, the packaging dream to
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
people. But
That's great.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Those are some of the ones that jump out to us, and none of them are
Really
insurmountable.
valuable.
They're just the things you work through.
And I think that for those smaller businesses, we fully appreciate that you are in love with this product, the concept, the pain that's being solved in the market, whatever it is that you're going after. And sometimes it can be, just like you said, so exciting to now get it out and to share it with the world. But having to come back to, do a brand new run again, or to go back to the drawing board, there are costs involved with getting it wrong when you go back out to when you go to market the first time with issues. So getting a little bit of a delay up front potentially, or even just starting the process sooner and investing a little bit of capital to ensure that that launch is effective as possible and has the best land, the best first impression, all that good stuff is so powerful. And there's a long list of case studies where organizations got it wrong when they went out firsthand and they didn't trust, the people in the market didn't see the value in it, and then have to go back and spend significantly more and then have delays and competitors come in looking for it. So it's not a fear position that we want listeners to get into on this, but it's encouragement that if you're thinking, should I be investing in these things up front to make sure this is right to begin with? Absolutely. You're going to see the return on that over a longer period of time.
I think
So
the earlier you can introduce the conversation around packaging, I think people have the opportunity to put in place what they need to do to get the most out of it. And we're having you're having conversations with people where what the product's even going to physically look like are unsure about. But the advice we're giving them is like, well, this is what the packaging process is going to look like. This is when we can start engaging and making meaningful progress in bits and pieces of the project. But these are things you really want to get in line. Like, are you working on your brand? Have you got have you got an agency who's working on something? Have you got someone who's going to take that branding and turn it into your actual packaging artwork? Spend some time finding the person you want to do that. And I think that is hugely valuable as well. And especially taking, some experience from, some brands coming from healthcare and then moving into wellness and trying to build, or
yeah,
you can build a different brand, I guess. And some people take well, in healthcare, I'm allowed to use, I can use 3 colors and I have this hierarchy of information. It's quite formulaic and that's enough. So you can do that, or with this particular product that you've developed, going into a more of a consumer product or consumer wellness product, you can create an entirely different experience, and it's an entirely different process and journey to create that. And if you create if you create that health product, maybe that is what your brand is. Is that it is all science, but you don't have to do that. There are other there are alternatives, and I think sometimes that hasn't really been considered. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, that's there's an enlightenment, a moment of like, okay, well, there's this whole other thing, or people say I'm not a graphic expert, I'm not expert in
Yeah.
graphics, and they move on, and it's like, well, let's address that. Perhaps you should start addressing that as we you know progress through this project.
Yeah, and it also helps to keep things a little bit fun. If you're in that smaller founder stage business, um, to have the peace of mind that some of these things that are more complex, that are sort of more macro, geographic, logistical things, to have those
Yeah.
taken care of by people that know exactly what they're doing, and then to have their expertise on the design and get this passion that you have out into the world in as best a way as possible. That's a really fun experience, and I've loved seeing these people go through that stage and just having a whale of a time, and then get it out into the market. They're way more assured. They've done some testing, and they land well. So yeah, we're with you on that for sure. And and there's a lot of macro sort of economical things going on a global scale at the moment within the industry. We're here in the US currently. There's lots of fluctuation on tariffs on the logistics side and the manufacturing side. There's trend changes going on within the market in general. What we'd love to do, if it's okay, Alex, is pick your brain a little bit here on what you see as the future of packaging and product evolving over the next 5 to 10 years, sort of near term. And what should our listeners and businesses be doing today to stay ahead of some of those curves? Do you have anything to offer them on that?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's a roller coaster for anyone in packaging and product design and device manufacture. So we're all riding that one. And again, I think we've all found strategies to work with those constraints that are put upon us. But gazing beyond that, and maybe we can put that one to bed. Maybe we do move on from it, and that's not a concern anymore. But I think
Yeah,
what's interesting is sustainability. I think is a fascinating one. I mean, it's a current trend, and it will continue to be one. But I think it will. I think its importance is only going to get more and more. Um, you know ingrained in the design process, and the canvas with which you work with is going to change. The materials in which you use is changing. There'll be innovations that I don't know what they are, but in 5 years there might be something else we'd love to start incorporating into packaging. Can we reduce the bulk by using this miracle material? Can we, what are all these performance advantages we can get, or what are the CO2 advantages we can get by using some of these other things that are out there? And I think that the pressure's coming from brands, from customers, and from regulatory changes as well, which is great. When the pressure's coming from everywhere,
yeah,
it's unavoidable. And yeah, I'm keen to see the pressure stay on. We've got to work harder. Burgopak has to work hard. Every packaging supplier is going to have to work really hard to from a moral perspective as well. So that one, great, front and center.
yeah,
A complete random one that I've been sort of like pondering recently, because it's been in the press. It's like, with the people who talk about like agentic commerce or agentic shopping. And I was thinking, if that does become a thing, or, a sizable thing, what does that mean for packaging? And it's a fascinating, op- let's say it was a fascinating opportunity. It was a fascinating new
mm,
way of considering packaging. So it's not there in the decision, it's not there necessarily at the front end of the decision-making process, but the weight of importance on the arrival of your product in the packaging, the moment that you get it, to convince you to, repurchase it, or not just to mash the button again to make another decision based on those changing market forces, which product's cheaper at this bit based on your preference for cost over something else.
mm,
I'm really intrigued by that. And I think, we watch it, we see, is it as big as it needs to be? Is there going to be an AI crash? Who knows? But it's a really fascinating thought to explore, thought experiment. What does it
Yeah.
mean? So, I think, work on your unboxing experiences, because you
Yeah.
really are going to have to be working on that customer retention at that point if it does take off.
Yeah, it's way more personal at that point. If you really want
Yes.
to outcompete, it has to reach through all of the experiences until it gets into somebody's hands, and then they have to make a conscious decision based on that. Usually, it's some form of joy. It's some form of unexpected positivity, and there's a whole spectrum of where that comes from on a sort of circle of that emotion. But you can get that across with doesn't have to be drastic cost or drastic time, but with thoughtful time and thoughtful cost it's possible. So I'm excited about it too. I think that the sort of the predictive side of repurchases, the predictive side of the packaging logistics trail, and how organizations go about choosing what, when, and how consumers then are pushed into boxes of, no pun intended there, but pushed into boxes of purchasing through agentic options. It's going to create an interesting dilemma, but an ever more interesting opportunity for design, for art, for experience, and for the emotional experience of these different things.
Yeah.
And and I think that have you seen any sort of more consumer behavior trend changes outside of the AI and of the impact of the economic situations going on and logistics? Have you seen any different trends in people in the tribes they belong to and how they're behaving in the marketplace? Have you seen any change there?
I think, what have we seen? I think the consumer is expecting more just in general from the packaging. So people won't accept mediocre or average, be it through the visual identity. Um, People just want something more. The packaging really does have to give them something.
Hmm.
That we mentioned like that, that moment of joy or reaffirms they belong to or that brand, yeah, their values align with that brand. They're part of that tribe. And so, I think people trying to work towards that. I think that's one we're doing at
Yeah.
the moment.
Definitely. Well, you've given us some real gold here, Alex. If somebody wanted to follow your journey, reach out about some work that they have they'd like to engage with you on, or just sort of be in contact and see what you're producing moving forwards, what's the best way for them to do that? Do you have a specific email or LinkedIn or a certain channel that they should go to?
Well, I'd love to talk to anyone and everyone about packaging, so do get in touch. But the Burgopak website is best place to start. That's burgopak.com, and then you can find me on LinkedIn as well. And yeah, we'd love to talk about packaging.
Absolutely. We'll make sure that's linked into the show notes here so you can click off and do that. But as always, thank you so much to our guest here. We've really enjoyed digging into all of these different topics. And just wanted to overall say that if you have enjoyed this, be sure to subscribe to this podcast, or if you're watching it on video, wherever you are, all of the robot algorithm overlords that control things will appreciate that. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, or you would like to be a guest on this as well, feel free to reach out at hello@merchantboxes.com. We'll make sure to respond to that. But until next time, keep thinking outside the box and creating unforgettable brand experiences. See you later. Bye. Thank you for listening to today's episode. It was sponsored by Merchant Boxes. Merchant Boxes provide custom packaging to large businesses and small creators that customers love. If you are looking for award-winning custom package designs that make your business and products stand out from the competition, click the link in the show notes to find out more.